Hey everyone. So I recently asked you, what is it that holds you back from creating what you desire? And one of the answers was fear of failure. And I thought that was such a great answer because it's relatable to all of us. Also because there are many more layers underneath that I think will be very helpful to address. And so I wanted to have this conversation because fear of failure is not necessarily a bad thing. And when we understand what it really is, then we can, make certain choices to kind of, get a handle on it or to overcome it. And so that's really what I want to share here is not just how we can overcome the fear of failure, but to really get underneath it and understand what it's all about. And it may be different for each person. So if, as you're watching this, if something I say doesn't resonate with you, that's okay. There will probably be something in this video at some point that resonates. So I wanted to share some of my insights that I have about fear of failing. So it may not be fear of failure per se. It may be that you're just not believing in yourself. Maybe you don't actually believe that what you set out to do or what you want to create is something that you can accomplish or achieve. You might not believe that you have the ability to achieve it. You might not believe that you have the resources. You might not just believe in yourself that what you want to create or achieve is good enough or valuable enough or that you can actually do it. So you might not be afraid of failing, you might just not be believing in yourself. And along those lines, you may not be trusting yourself. You might not trust yourself in the journey that is required when you're creating something, when you're setting something into action, putting something into motion. It's a journey. Very rarely does something, happen like that, right? It's usually like this ongoing process or journey. And to trust yourself that you're going to stay in it. You may not be trusting yourself that you'll actually stay in the journey long enough to see the fruition that happens on the other side. Along with the not trusting yourself or not believing in yourself, there may be an underlying unworthiness. So again, it might not be a true fear of failure, but you might just be feeling unworthy of creating what you desire, of having the fruition appear as you go along the journey. And so this, unworthiness or not good enough kind of feeling is something, unfortunately, I can't give that to you. That's something only you can cultivate for yourself. To know that you really are worthy to have your creations show up for you in your everyday physical reality. To know that you're worthy of having and realizing what your heart and soul desires. That worthiness can only come from your knowing. Someone can tell you that you're great. Someone can tell you that you have a beautiful voice, like Danielle, who's with us now. Someone can tell you, that you're an exceptional writer and that you should write books. But if you don't feel worthy of it, or if you don't believe in yourself, or you don't trust yourself to do a good enough job, you're never going to take those forward moving steps to bring your project to completion. And so that worthiness is something that can only come from you. And that, I'm not saying it's an easy thing to cultivate, but it's totally doable. And then, along the journey, you get the feedback that, yeah, I accomplished this little thing. And then you strengthen your trust muscle, as I call it. So the fear of failure, it may also be a fear of actually being successful. It may be a fear of being seen. It may be a fear of your own power and greatness. Now, how would a fear of failure actually be a fear of success? Sometimes our minds get a little twisted around and we think, I'm scared to do this because I don't want to fail. But really what's happening is you're scared to do it because what if you don't fail? What if you're actually wildly successful with it? Then what? Because that would bring about a lot of change in your life. And the ego doesn't like change. So it might not be a fear of failure. You might actually like to stay in that perpetual cycle of failure because the ego is familiar with that. And that would be way more comfortable in a weird sort of way than actually having a success. And so it's just something to, ask yourself, am I actually scared of failing or am I scared of having a success? And in my, 13 plus years of being in business, that's a question that I looked at a lot. Is this, do I not want to take this step because I'm scared of failing? Or am I actually scared of being really successful? Whoa. A lot of times the answer for me was a fear of being successful because that would mean big change in my life. And at the time, before I was, had that muscle to be able to make the quantum leaps and the big changes, that was pretty scary. Because the ego likes that status quo. The ego doesn't like change. Okay. A lot of times, the fear of failure looks like having a rigidity of thought. Having attachments to the way you think success looks. Having attachment to very specific outcomes. So instead of allowing the journey, anything is a failure if it's not an exact match to the specific outcome that you have in mind. Is this making sense? Give me a thumbs up or a comment or something to let me know if this is making sense. The attachment to specific outcomes is something that can look like a fear of failure. So what I've noticed is when you expand yourself and you open yourself up to enjoy the journey and you just decide to take that one step forward, that one step gives you feedback and clarity about what you really want. Is this working for me or not? Do I like this or do I need to try something different? And that one first step gives you the clarity, gives you feedback about what you want or not. Instead of, this is the thing that I'm creating and it's only this thing. And anything less than that is a failure. So it's not truly a fear of failure. It's just a very rigid attachment to what that success might look like. Being very attached to a specific outcome. Another thing that could be underneath the fear of failure is a consciousness of lack, a lack consciousness. Or a shame about not being able to achieve what is perceived as valuable. So, we in this world, or us humans, have sometimes ideas about what's valuable. And oftentimes, instead of following our own desires and our own hearts, we allow the projections or the thoughts of what other people think are valuable, even what other people think we should do, to affect us and to affect our ability to move forward and create what we want. And so it's not necessarily that we're fearing failure, but that we are allowing the projections of others to tell us what you want isn't valuable. Take a deep breath. We allow other people to say, yeah, don't do that because that's not truly valuable. Nobody's going to want to buy that, or no one's going to listen to that, or, hear what you have to say about that. So we have this shame about not being able to achieve what we want because we're allowing the projections of others to dictate, what we are able to achieve or not. I mean, just think about that. Think about how ridiculous that is, that we would allow ourselves not to move forward because someone else has told us No one's going to want that. No one's going to want to buy that. No one wants to hear what you have to say about that. That's not a valuable service. That's not a valuable thing to offer. But if it's in your heart, if it's in your soul, that's valuable. And that goes back to the earlier part of the conversation where I talked about unworthiness. You have to know that you're worthy to follow your dreams, to follow your passions, to follow your heart and your guidance. That worthiness has to be there if you want longevity for the journey. So, again, may not be fear of failure, may just be you're allowing the projections of others to have an influence over your decisions. I mentioned this a little bit before, but I'll go a little bit deeper into it. Resisting the journey. This life is a journey, and when we set out to create something, when we set out to achieve something, it's generally a journey. It usually doesn't happen just like that. And what usually happens is we get a vision, or we have part of the vision, and we think we just, or at least I do, we just want to race to the finish line, get to the end, and have the result already. But something that can happen is this impatience thing that you may not be afraid of failing, but you may just be impatient for the fruition to come about. And it does take time to create because we're in this density. And even though manifestations are speeding up for some, creating within the great density that is here on planet Earth does take a lot of time. And so yeah. So the visions and the inspirations and the passions that we have don't always come to fruition immediately. Sometimes it takes 10 years. Sometimes it takes 20 years. Sometimes it only takes a month. But you get the idea. It's not something that we can go into as a sprint. It is a marathon, and so that we need that patience, and we need to surrender to the journey and not have such resistance about this is the way it should be, this is the timeline it should be, this is the exact outcome and result it should be. Truly allowing the journey to unfold and taking one step at a time instead of having to have the journey be a very specific way, that rigidity of thought that I mentioned earlier. That's really important, to be able to soften the mind, to be able to open up and allow the heart to take the lead and allow your inspirations to take the lead instead of this is how it has to be done, this is the deadline. And, look, I say all of this from having come from that, from having deadlines that, sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. And so all of that is the way our minds sometimes work, but it's not always the truth. Okay. We talked about fear of change and how the ego doesn't like change. So sometimes fear of failure isn't actually fear of failure, it's fear of change. Because if you don't fail, then what happens? Things change. Yeah, that's a big one. Getting frustrated that it hasn't happened yet and then assuming it's not in alignment. Sometimes that feedback when something doesn't happen does tell us that something's not in alignment, and sometimes that feedback when something hasn't happened is telling us it's not the right time. And so how do you discern that? Actually, this is a good question. How do you discern if it's not right for you, or if it's just not the right timing, or not the right alignment? It's a knowing within your heart. If there is a desire in your soul, if there is a desire in your heart that will not go away, that means it must come to fruition at some point. That's my belief. If you have a desire and 5 years later that desire is faded, it's not important to you anymore, it's not relevant for your life that you have now, may not have ever been a true desire, or maybe it's just no longer in alignment. But if you have a desire that doesn't quit, this is how it works for me anyway. If you have a desire that doesn't quit, and you dream about it, you feel about it, you think about it, it's just kind of always there in the background, and you take steps to move forward, it hasn't happened yet, doesn't mean it's not alignment. Maybe it's not the right time. Or maybe it's not with the people that you thought it was going to be with. Maybe it's a different group of people. Maybe it's a different circumstance. Doesn't mean that it's not the right thing for you. just means that maybe new alignments need to come in. So again, that's something you have to know in your heart, and only you can know that. No one can tell you that if that's right for you or not. Only you can know that. So how do we overcome this? I sort of mentioned this earlier, is expand your idea. Like, move into expansiveness. Expand your idea of what is success. What would it mean to not fail, and what does success look like? You know, as a business owner, I always thought success meant having tons of money in the bank. That's no longer my idea of success. My idea of success now is to be able to facilitate healing for people. If I helped one person, that's success. If I helped 100 people, that's success. If I've helped 1,000 people, that's success. Me showing up, me being in the moment, me being present, that's success. And that surrender, for me to be able to surrender to that and to expand and open up to a different idea of success, has really worked very well for me. It has allowed me to flow, it's allowed me to relax, it's decreased the stress factor. It's really just changed my whole world around. So I would invite you to expand into a greater idea of what success means. And I'm going to give you a little story that I don't think I've shared this publicly yet. Excuse me, I'm really thirsty. Okay. Last year, I was planning a retreat for October. The guidance was very clear, planned for 20 people, and the guidance was clear, it was strong, I was full of passion, I was full of energy around it. Even my mentor was like, yeah, Susie, prepare for 20 people. Like, this is happening, you know? And so I did. I rented a retreat house. Normally I have the retreats here in my home, and there's no upfront cost other than the caterer. You know, it's very relaxed, very, it works. 20 people won't fit in here. So I followed the guidance and I rented a retreat house and did a ton of marketing around it. Had lots of interest. 22 people expressed their interest, said that they wanted to come. It was really like, yeah, following the guidance, in the flow, this is happening. Nobody registered. Nobody. And I was shocked because the guidance was clear. The guidance was strong. I was full of desire and passion around this retreat. And I didn't see it as a failure at the time. I truly didn't. It was like, okay, that happened, lesson learned, lost a bunch of money on it. No big deal. It's just money. Money comes and goes. No big deal. And I truly felt like that. But what happened was, when I felt the desire to plan the next retreat, I couldn't take that first step. I just felt like, what if I put all my love and passion into this again and nothing happens again? I can't do that. I can't bring myself to do that. It would just break my heart. And so I realized something. So this is the part of the journey where you get feedback. It gives you clarity. You learn from it. You grow. You do your inner work. Okay? I realized that the way I had put so much of myself into planning the retreat, and it was depleting for me when no one responded and said yes to it and invested in themselves, because I had, how do I say it? I put so much of myself into it in a way that I wasn't as unattached as I thought I was. And so when it came to marketing the retreat that we're having, actually starting a week from today, I decided I was gonna do all of it in a different way. I said, I'm gonna show up with total unattachment. I'm going to share this retreat in a way that brings me joy, in a way that feeds my soul and my spirit. And I made that commitment that yes, I would still market the retreat, but I would just not be attached to if it landed with anyone, if anyone said yes to it. And so I started writing these poems. I'm calling the wizards, the alchemists, the light workers, the light wearers, the light weavers, the keepers of the grid. I was marketing in a very different way. And there was so much joy coming through me as I was writing the poems and doing the videos and all of the things. And I wasn't attached to if people resonated with it or not, if people invested in themselves or not. I wasn't attached. And so that's how you overcome the fear of failure. You show up. You put your desires out there, and you're present with the desires. Instead of developing attachment to the outcome of your desire, you simply show up and you share it. Now, there is a whole discussion we could have around safety of sharing your creations, when they're in the fetal stage, before they've been birthed, and sometimes you want to nurture them a little bit before you share, publicly. But that's kind of a different conversation. But instead of, having this idea about the fear of failing, what I'm inviting you into is an expansiveness in your idea of what failure or success is. To blur the lines a little bit and to dance with what is failure versus what is success, and to not get caught up in, I'm not going to even take the first step because there's no way I'm going to ever reach that outcome. Well, if you never take the first step, then you're right. I was just having this conversation with a client the other day, just inviting him to take the first step. Because look, we don't know all the steps on the journey. We're not given a map. Okay, turn here, go 5 paces this way, and then 5 miles down the road that way, then turn left. We don't have that map. Our map is our heart. Our map is our soul. Our map is our guidance. And so what we have to do is to show up every day, to be present every day, to listen to our guidance, to listen to what our heart is asking of us, to listen to what our soul is longing for, and follow that. And yes, you can have an ego desire and do that too. For me, I prefer the soul and heart desires because they're much more fulfilling and sustainable for me. That's me. No judgment about what you choose with that. But take the first step without attachment of how it ends up. And if you take the first step and nothing happens after that, okay. If you take the first step and you realize, this isn't actually going in the direction that I want at all, okay, you regroup and take a different first step. And if you take the first step and you're like, yeah, I'm on to something, then you take the next step and the next step. And allow the journey, surrender to the journey, surrender to the timing, surrender to the people and the circumstances if there is anyone else involved in your creations. Allow yourself just to take that first step and not get attached to what needs to happen to get your outcome. So I hope this was helpful for you. I would love to, if you have any questions about what we've talked about, put those in the comments below. And I'll come back and take a look a little bit later. And if you are feeling called to join us at the retreat, it starts next week, Thursday, May 31st, and we go until Sunday. And it is going to be an amazing time, a soul family reunion where we get together and we share what it is that we're creating and releasing things that no longer serve you. And I'll just share this real quick before I go. I was at the creek yesterday and I just was crying, and I was like, what is all this grief that I'm feeling? And when I asked about it, the answer was, I was releasing the grief for the people attending the retreat, for the lives they'd be leaving behind. Because what's going to happen at this retreat is people are going to transform themselves so deeply that their lives that they're going into after they leave the retreat are not going to be the same. And whenever we rebirth ourselves, there is a grieving that needs to happen for what we're leaving behind, for the old life, the old brain programs and patterns, the old nervous system, the old way of doing things, the old way of thinking about things. There is a grieving that happens with that. I've gone through it many times myself. And so I was just kind of blown away by that experience, to be able to start the process has already started. For those of you who have said yes to the retreat and you're coming, the process has already started for you. The energy is already running for you. As soon as you say yes, that transformational energy is running, and you're working on releasing what no longer serves and rebirthing yourself into the new creation that you'll be. So join us at the retreat if that resonates with you. And you can go to creationtemple.com/retreat for all the information. I look forward to seeing you here in beautiful Sedona. It's an epic place to be, and I have some epic plans for the retreat. So lots of love, you guys. Thanks for being with me on this live stream, and I'll see you in the next video. Much love. Mwah.